So do you want to talk about revisiting no mean right?
Yeah, so yeah, sure.
You were
Start
having
this.
dinner or lunch or something with family, and you
Yeah,
talked about Crazy Rich Asians, right?
yeah. And eventually led into discussion about Constance Wu's autobiography and her rape or alleged rape. And I was asking some of my friends, the question, or I posed the question, should no mean no, right? And I have a feeling that some of the disconnect is maybe there's a better way of phrasing the question
Hmm.
because maybe that way of framing it sort of, it gets people to sort of draw or think of different consequences. So the women that I spoke to were all not just the women actually. It was my neighbor, her daughter, and both of their significant others. It was unanimous that they made a very clear black and white distinction that no means no, right? And my position is that it should be there's sort of shades of gray, and I'm not comfortable with just saying that this sort of absolute position that
Hmm.
that no means no. And today I had brunch with some family, and just maybe because I'm an idiot, I think I'm slowly learning my lesson. But I asked one of my female family members, I'm curious what your opinion is on this, and she said the same thing. Um,
Well, how did you phrase the question? Did you just say does no mean no? Or you were you referencing Constance Wu's story and
yeah.
whether that
I,
qualifies?
Yeah, I was referencing Constance Wu's story, although I didn't get into any of the details, but she was aware of this alleged rape.
Hmm.
Although what was interesting is that I think I don't even it's not even clear to me like there might have been multiple instances because the one that I told her about or I gave her a little bit more detail than the one that I had read in the autobiography, it wasn't a person that was in a position of power. And she was saying that maybe it was like a producer or something, and that was completely not. That might have been a different case.
That was a different case. She's talking about her being harassed on the set.
Okay, yeah.
Oh.
So that wasn't even. Yeah, I don't think that was even alleged rape. It was probably just
He was like
harassment.
touching her or something. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the best argument that I came up with, even when we first talked about this, I don't know if I ever articulated or if we even articulated sort of a concrete argument. But what I came up with is a couple things. The first one being just an analogy to sort of controversial topic in the transgender community, if a, regarding pronouns, right? So if in my position on that is if a if I'm with a transgender person, maybe a friend, and they ask me to use a certain pronoun, I will gladly respect their wishes, right? However, this talk about I think Canada maybe I don't know if this is fake news or what, but there's talk about Canada mandating or having
Right,
legislation
the Jordan Peterson thing.
that enforces you to use a certain pronoun. I think that's that's overstepping. Like it shouldn't be a crime to use the wrong pronoun.
All right. They didn't
Uh,
say you have to use a pronoun, but it was just sort of this broad, you have to respect.
mhm.
There's like
So
human, it's part of like human rights. It's under a big umbrella and it's vague enough
okay,
language that you could be punished for it.
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and so similarly, you know, I I would use my own best judgment, which would most likely be erring on the side of caution, and hence, if a woman was saying no to me, I would take that very seriously, and I don't have a problem with that. But what's happening right now is, I guess they're trying to make this societal standard, right? Where
Hmm.
this absolute standard of no means no, and that is not the kind of world that I want to live in, basically. And here's the basic reason why. And yeah, maybe there's better arguments, but this is the one that I thought of, which is just that communication is much more complicated than just the words that are coming out of somebody's mouth, right? Like you can, there's people, I don't know, depending on what you read, I've read something like about 30% of the information content, when we're talking with somebody, only about 30% of it is the actual words that are coming out of their mouth, right? The verbal content. And the other 70% consists of vocal tonality and body language.
Yeah, there's more
And,
communication than just a word. Sure.
and to make it more concrete, I could easily design a movie scene. Let's say, it's some kind of foreplay scene or whatever, right? Where a man and woman are starting to get intimate. You could easily design a movie scene where the woman is verbally saying no, but every single everyone except the staunchest sort of leftist would watch that scene and they would all understand that even though the woman is saying no, that she actually wants it to happen, right? For example, she might be motioning with her fingers or her hands, come hither, kind of, right, with her
Sure.
finger, right? And also, the way in which she says no, it's just like when you say the F word, right, and you can make it mean 10 different things depending on your vocal tonality of how you say it. So you could easily imagine her using a certain vocal tonality when she says no, where it's just obvious that she doesn't actually mean no, right?
Of
And
course. Yeah.
and so I think so that's basically that's kind of the essence of my argument, is just that communication is more complicated than just words. And I think the world that they are painting as ideal, I think rational male behavior in that world would eventually be, even if the woman is interested in having sex, the male wouldn't proceed until she signs some kind of written document.
Yeah.
And that sounds outrageous, but actually it seems very rational to me.
Well, a lot of
Like,
celebrities do it that way.
okay, I
Celebrities,
didn't
if you
even.
have an NDA, that, right? A lot of celebrities require you to sign an NDA before having sex, and that is a pretty clear indicator that you are willing to have sex, right?
That's interesting. I didn't know it already. Wow. So, with my family member earlier today at brunch, she actually accepted this world. She basically said, at first she said, she pushed back. She said, "Oh, I don't think, it won't turn into that." But then later she actually conceded, like, if that's what it takes, if that's what it takes, then so be it. So she's actually okay with a world where basically men are asking women to sign a document before they have sex.
Well, that's fine.
Um,
I don't care. If that's the world, it doesn't matter to me. I think that women wouldn't like it. I think the men would actually be okay with it. I'll be honest with you. I think men would be fine with it. It's the women.
so
They think they want it, but when it actually happens, they won't like it. It's one of those deals.
okay, let me comment on that, but then I'll ask you to elaborate more. But I had a similar thought, which is that basically this is removing expressive power from women, right? Like I was thinking about, now this is sort of going, it's sort of changing to different contexts, but just think about the cases where somebody might say no, but not necessarily that they're trying to say no to something, but they have some other ulterior motive to saying no, right? For example, maybe there's a woman who sort of wants to test how strongly the other person feels. So you ask a person out on a date, right? Maybe the first time they say no, but it's like it's not like a solid, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, yeah, just, maybe they don't want to go out with them now, but who knows? And then the guy maybe persists, and eventually the person maybe changes their mind. I have a feeling even maybe some of my family members got into relationships that started out like that. Another example I was thinking about, but I haven't quite figured everything out about it yet, but I was thinking about the act of flirting. What's the essence of flirting? I feel like it involves this manipulation of, I don't know, maybe it's not a good example, but I was just thinking about ways that people, where people will say something that they don't necessarily mean.
Well, of course, that happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like this would be, in essence, taking away expressive power from women because they're just not able to express themselves in certain ways. Because if you just take everything literally, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think that if you ask just does no mean no, maybe that is the wrong way to ask for the question because I think no does mean it does mean no. It doesn't mean yes. I mean, the word itself does mean no. I think the more pertinent question is, does no always mean rape? I think that's the more useful question, and that's where the gray
hmm,
area comes in. The
mhm,
analogy I would make is if there's a human on my property and I don't want them to be here, I I tell them I don't want them to be here. At some point, I have the right to defend my property in a lot of states and shoot that person because them remaining on my property while I have expressed that I want them to leave, that's an aggressive act in itself. I have the right to defend my property. However, there's a huge gray area in this, all the way from some stranger that I've never seen running onto my property and trying to kick my door in. Okay, that's a pretty clear instance where I can defend myself and my property, right? But
mhm.
then how about a person who's walking their dog and is just sort of on my grass and I tell them to get off? At what point am I allowed to shoot them? Because they don't do it or they don't do it quick enough. All the way to what if I had a friend over for drinks and then we got in an argument. I said, leave my house.
Mhm.
How quickly does he have to leave before I can consider him trespassing and shoot him?
Right,
These are all
right.
these are all in a gray area. Now, in every single one of these situations, me telling them no or me telling them get the fuck off my property, it all does mean get the fuck off my property. There's no
Yeah,
there's no yeah, it definitely means no. It definitely means leave. It definitely means all of that. However,
yeah.
at what point are they guilty of an aggressive act of trespassing or overstaying their welcome? And at what point am I justified in shooting them? That's all a gray area, and people would have to look at each situation on a case by case basis and decide if it was warranted, right? So
Maybe they would argue that point is penetration.
maybe I just don't know. But what my point is, there is a gray area that they want this black and white delineation, and it just doesn't exist in the real world. It doesn't exist. Just like in the real world, trespassing isn't black and white. There is a gray area depending on who you are, what you were doing, what time of day it is, what your relationship is to me. All of this stuff matters. I'm sorry, but it does. So her
It's
telling a guy
weird.
no
Yeah.
who she's been on a date with and this and that, and she knows the guy, and it's way different than obviously a stranger breaking into her apartment. These are all, there's a spectrum here and there's a gray area at some point. And that not recognizing that it's not realistic, and it just shows how dead set they are on, I guess, characterizing this. And I can sort of understand because what has happened in the past is, of course, when there's a gray area, the gray area has been abused by some people, right? So that's something that women don't want. They don't want guys abusing that gray area. And I can understand that.
Right, right.
But
And I
that
think
doesn't mean
that's
that the
yeah,
gray area doesn't exist.
and I think that's exactly what they're visualizing in their mind, when I pose this question, is they're thinking about the woman who's basically like the Constance Wu scenario. I don't know, maybe they're thinking even worse than that. So
Yeah.
basically she says
Yeah.
she's saying no and then and it's clear that she means no. So not like the movie scene,
In
the
her
fake movie
mind,
scene,
she
but
she
actually
meant no. But she was already making out with that guy. She says willingly, right?
no.
And then he took it one step too far, of course. And she really wanted it only to go to this level. But the analogy would be like me inviting my friend over for drinks. Like my intent is just that we have drinks, but he thinks that he can stay the night or he can stay like a couple days because he needs a place to crash or something. I clearly don't want to let you do that. But this is not the same situation as a person breaking into my house. I can shoot that person immediately. You're clearly trespassing. At what point can I shoot my friend because he wants to overstay his welcome? Can I even ever shoot him? I already let, it's clearly your friend. You let him in for drinks. Clearly he shouldn't stay, for several days, but this is a gray area that exists in the real world. And this is the gray area that Constance Wu found herself in. It's a guy she's dating. She's willing to make out with him on the couch. She does not want to have sex. So in that sense, no does mean no. I believe you. I take you at your word. But you've entered into a gray area where the other person's interpretation of what's going on could be a little bit different than yours, and just being a little bit different could result in sex, right?
Yeah. So it's clear that they're trying to push the societal standard into, this guy would have basically just heard no and left, right?
Yes, and I think that that's fair to ask. It's fair to ask for that to happen, sure. Just like it's fair for me if I tell my friend that he needs to leave tonight as opposed to stay a few days, it's fair for me to expect him to do that.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't do that, is it the same kind of crime as the guy who busts down my door? It's not. That's why I think that the better question is, does no always indicate that it was rape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely. I think that's well said. Something I'll keep that in mind in the future. But I think earlier, so I think you were about to, or you had some sort of unintended consequences in mind when you're thinking that women actually probably aren't going to like this world.
No, I don't think they would. It's one of those be careful what you wish for situations. What happens in a world where everybody just signs a NDA or some kind of contract before having sex and it's all laid out there? Now you have a world where sex is totally transactional. There's no romance to it, right? And my guess is women would not like that world very much, whereas men, although men wouldn't love that world either, I think men would be more copacetic with a world where sex is entirely transactional. I'll live. It's more important for men to just have the sex act. Whether it was transactional is not, a deal breaker necessarily. But I think that world would suck for women. They would find it terribly boring and dull and unromantic, don't you think?
I can definitely. I think I see what you're getting at with the unromantic aspect. I mean, that definitely.
Yeah, it's like, do you really want? Okay,
You
here,
can imagine.
go
Yeah,
on a date. Go on a date, and then before kissing the girl, ask her, "Is it okay if I kiss you right now?" Please say yes, if it's all right. And then you kiss her once, and then you say, "Is it okay if I kiss you again?" It's a new iteration, so I need to ask you again. Yes, okay, and lean in for a kiss. Just see how much she loves that. Oh yeah, that's just gonna get her wet, No, it's not. It's gonna be fucking terrible for her. Is that the world you want? This is that world. I totally, like I said, I can understand where they're coming from when they just want no to mean no. Because yeah, when you say no, you just like you want them to obey. You only want it to go up to the line that you set. Understood. Okay, totally understandable. And you don't want to get abused by people hanging out in the gray area. Okay, I can also understand that. It's just like the friend who kind of just overstays their welcome just a little bit. They're kind of abusing that gray area in a way. I don't like it, but this is the messy gray area world that we live in.
It is. It is weird. I tried to argue that basically, yeah, it's my position is basically let adults be adults, let humans be humans, and that this is a complicated situation without a clear cut answer.
Yeah, but the problem is when you're talking
people,
about a legal question as far as like, was this a case of rape or not? You have to be specific. You have to nail down specifics and
okay, yeah.
rules, right?
So there it is more clear cut, I would say, but not necessarily simple.
No, it's not. So it's not satisfying, but the real answer is that this is just something you have to judge case by case. I know that's really super unsatisfying, but that's just what it is.
Yeah.
But they want this clear-cut rule where If she said no, then yes, it's automatically rape
Exactly.
because it's
Yeah.
easy. It's an easy rule to lean on, and you feel protected because all you have to do is say no, and that means that you are absolved of all responsibility and all the things you did to create this situation you're in, right? For instance, willingly making out with this guy on the couch that
Actually, but
led to this. As
they
long as you
go
say no, you're not responsible for what happens next.
so they go even further than this, right? They will say that even if you're in the middle of having sex and then
Yeah, yeah, and you say no and
the
stop.
person says
Yeah,
no, then you have to stop. I mean, that
and
just
yeah, you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but obviously this is well into that gray area.
and it's easily abused, right? Yeah, I totally agree. You should stop, but you could see if somebody had malicious intent that could be something that is easily abused.
Yeah. So again, that's where you go back to case by case basis.
Yeah.
I have to see the details of this situation to make a judgment. But that doesn't feel again, I can understand why they don't like this because that doesn't feel safe. It feels like, oh, they could be on the wrong side of this gray area judgment. They don't want that to even be a possibility. They want them the ability to say no and that be it. They're in the right. They're absolved of putting themselves in that situation. They can get the desired outcome. If they don't get the desired outcome, the other person is guilty of a crime.
Hmm.
That feels safe. That feels comfortable. But it's just not realistic. That's my issue with it. I can totally understand the motivation for wanting a world that looks like this and for wanting this clear cut. I have a stop button, and that stop button must be respected. It feels safe. It would be like, oh, I don't even need to make I've made enough analogies. It's just it has to be case by case. It can't.
I,
It can't. It can't be just black and white. No does mean no. In the English language, it does. But whether or not a crime was committed, we just have to view the details of the case.
I love to watch one of these leftists on a date.
They don't behave like this in their personal lives. They don't. This is all, it's the right thing to say in public, right? It's the right thing to say in public.
They
Just like
would
just
think,
like all the leftists in the Northeast who say that, open borders is the only humane policy. But in their personal lives, when they see some brown people move in, it's some kind of fucking crisis.
uh,
It's the exact same thing. It's virtue signaling. When it hits home and when you talk about how they actually live, it's quite a bit different.
there's probably, well, both of the men that were present also agreed to this. But I wonder, maybe if it was
Because
just
it's the
because
right thing to say. It's the right thing to
yeah,
say.
but maybe also it was that had to do, I feel like they're smarter than this. They should have understood, what my question.
Maybe they did understand, but also smart people sometimes say things just to get along. If they didn't feel like having a fight right then and there, maybe they just say things to get along,
Well, I
right?
mean, to get along with their significant others, I guess.
Yeah, is that not
Yeah, yeah.
also what a smart person might do?
What the younger of the two was saying was that he does feel like it's kind of the world that we're in now. It is a better place than, presumably the world where all this abuse by men was happening. Like he thinks that there's been progress, right? And I think I actually agree with that statement overall. I just think that it's just the pendulum has swung too far.
Right.
Um,
Definitely there's been progress. Like
yeah.
for many years, women could just be abused, So of course that's not a good world to live in, but right now we've just gone too far to the other side.
I really wonder if there are men out there who have, maybe as part of their virtue signaling or whatever, but have kind of been brainwashed by this and are now, this could even happen to me. I could see this happening to me, or just at their next date that they just are paralyzed, right? They can't stop thinking about this. And then can you imagine a person like that actually asking a woman, oh, is it okay if I kiss you now? And the woman would just clearly think that this guy is a total loser.
Not only should you ask, you should text the questions to them so that they have to text back. And this affirmative is recorded on a server somewhere that cannot be denied. It's time stamped. There you go. That's almost as good as a contract these days,
Yeah.
right? Would you like to have sex with me? And then you don't have to write your name because like it's from your account. And if she says yes, then boom, it's on a server out there. But then, unfortunately, she could just say that she said no in the middle of it and you refuse to
Right.
stop.
Right. What a
So,
nightmare. What a nightmare.
I mean, in fairness though, when guys make this sort of argument, like, oh, well, women could do this to me. Usually the rebuttal is, well, what kind of woman would do that to you? That doesn't sound like something actual people would do. Yes, I agree. That this does not sound like something an actual human being would do.
But
Uh,
it sounds like, I
but
mean, do you,
it could happen, which is true, and that is
I feel like
concerning.
but this has happened, right? Just, I think we're both of the opinion that uh,
It has
Constance
happened, but
Wu
I
is
it has
perhaps,
happened. Yes, they just
abusing.
sort of change their mind and say, in hindsight, oh, that was rape or something. Yeah, I think it has happened. I think that it's rare. I don't think this happens often, but yeah, the fact that it can happen is bad already, and the fact that it does happen sometimes is also bad.
Just having talked about this, I feel like I'm now hypersensitive in
Good.
this
You should
topic.
protect
Yeah.
yourself
Which is I
or
don't think
move to a
that's
more patriarchal country.
I don't think this is a good thing for me necessarily.
No, but I think in the broader scheme of things, this will rarely come up, of course. I think most people just sort of still behave as they used to. They don't get all technical about these things. You probably don't have to worry, but just that percentage chance that it could happen to you is concerning. What if
Right.
you did have a drunk night with some woman and then later on she changes her mind about what happened, even though what happened was very fuzzy and gray at the time? Yeah. And
I
sometimes
mean
it's
the
not even
yeah.
fuzzy and gray. They just change their mind. That's happened too. We had some high profile cases where that's happened, but yeah, you should ask your family members. Does no mean rape? That's a better question. Clearly, no does mean no. That's like a tautology.
I think they're gonna say it would mean rape if
Every single
if,
time without exception.
if
See,
there's
that's the type of black
penetration.
and
Yeah.
no, I just see that's the kind of black and white world I don't agree with. It depends. Like how long were you making out with him on your couch? Do you even have a sexual history with this person? What was how can we characterize the way you said no, right? Did you push him off of you? This all this stuff matters in these gray areas. And I know that's uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear. They just want to hear that no, it's an automatic legal defense. It's not. It's not.
I mean, obviously I don't know what they would say, but definitely the sense that I got from them was sort of yeah, they would probably push in this
That's just the right thing to say. That's just the right thing to say. I guarantee you, if they knew somebody who was in this situation, that they would have a more nuanced opinion of it. They would see it for the gray that it is. If it was your friend who was accused of rape because a woman was making out with him on the couch, but then said no at the last second, would you
Mhm.
just say, "Well, I guess my friend's a rapist"? I bet they wouldn't.
I hope you're right. I'm not
They would
certain.
say, "Well, I mean, they were making out on the couch, and what's the character of her no, right?"
Yeah.
They would ask those questions because it is case by case.
Did she physically try to resist at
Right.
all? Anyways, I feel like I'm not sure if digging into this was beneficial for my life or not. I think it's
It
going to
doesn't
be,
matter.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just going to be hypersensitive to this now.
It's okay. Just like I said, just move. I just geomax.